This is the Radio Silly Video News, brought to you in association with Worldwide Financial Planning. For advice on inheritance tax, business finance, mortgages, debt consolidation, investment and pensions, Matt Hyam from Worldwide Financial Planning is on the islands at the Atlantic Hotel on the first Thursday of every month. The Radio Silly Video News also brought to you in association with Truro and Penwith College. Find out about courses you can enjoy here on the islands or on the mainland at truro.ac.uk and listen out for one of 365 great reasons to visit Truro College every day on Radio Silly.
The people around here will know we used to go off islands with Pete and Ingrid and a crowd of us, and one particular night we went to Sampson, and it was a Thursday, and it was an election night. I don't know whether it was local elections or general elections, I can't remember. It was about 8 years ago. I don't know whether I should tell this, but Pete and Ingrid, his then girlfriend, were going to stay the night and they were going to camp on Sampson, which you weren't allowed to do. So we all piled over there, and Pete and Ingrid set up the tent, and then we were going to have a barbecue and on the sand, and all very nice. And we set up the little campsite and what have you. And there wasn't a lot of fuel about to have the fire. And we looked around, and then we saw this box just stood on the beach. I thought, what's that? And it was a tall 6 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot box. So we went over and examined it and looked around it, and we realised it was a polling booth. And we went inside, and there was a little shelf, and there was a pen hanging on a piece of string. And this polling booth was literally stuck on Sampson, a totally inhabited island. And it was there, and we looked, and we could not believe that somebody must have put a polling booth on Sampson.
Just absolutely bowled over by the amount of customers, tourists from the mainland, that beat a trail to Pete's shop, and they really loved his soaps, particularly, and I do too, and I'll miss them. They were very well made when he was in the mood to do them well. They were very well made and very natural. I don't know if anyone here will agree with me. And he had a huge following, and everybody loved him that went into the shop. Where's Pete, you know? So I think he will be missed. I think he will be missed very much.
Has anybody mentioned that he was the drummer with Marmalade?
Oh, no.
Has anybody mentioned that yet?
Every time we play Marmalade on Radio Silly, we mention that.
Before he made it big, or before they made it big. Yeah, Pete was the drummer.
There's Fred.
Yes, they got rid of Pete and made a #1 hit with Obla-Di Obla-Da, I think.
Fred will have loads of stories, won't you, Fred?
Well, the one I remember best was when he was trying to run his cinema and Methodist Hall. And one night he had a lovely Tommy Cooper evening. There's a load of friends of mine that come over every year. And we decided to go down for the Tommy Cooper evening. And we arrived, and Pete was there with a fez on, going, and everybody got in there, and he didn't take any money in to get us in. And then when he went to work the machinery, this video thing that played on the wall, he couldn't make it work. And he's going, I'll get it going in a minute, I've just got to plug this in here. It was hilarious. It was absolutely hilarious. And eventually I shouted from the back, well, what you need is a 9-year-old child. So he found one. We made this machine work, but when it started, the picture was upside down. So we eventually sorted that out, and we eventually had a very nice evening. But the bit before was absolutely funnier than actually watching the Tommy Cooper. At the end of it, Pete was so embarrassed because he made such a mess at the beginning. He didn't charge anybody. All he did was paid the bills for the Methodist Hall, and everybody had a good night. And I always reminded him about that for many years afterwards. Yeah.
I always remember, I mean, you often sit in the Coswallop corner area where Pete used to sit, usually in here. I always remember, I think it was a Hungarian worker, I can't remember where he was working, who got trapped by the game Spoof, and I think he just come over and he didn't, it was a game he used to play with pound coins. I can't remember how it worked, I don't think it had any rules really. He just made it up as he went along, and this guy because I don't think he knew anybody who was new on the island. He started sort of engaging and playing along, and Pete used to get really obsessive with this game. And after about 5 rounds, this guy was just desperate to get away, and he saw somebody he knew, and you could see the look, "Please take me away from here," in his eyes. Because I remember sitting with Phil Culver, and we were sort of eyeing out the situation, and he was saying, "Pete's going to pounce on that one next." And it was basically spread the message of spoof to complete strangers, because Pete was convinced it'd be like some big worldwide game of next big thing, bigger than Fredopoly.
Just say there's a couple of visitors that come over that really wanted. Trevor Thomas from, Dave knows him, don't you?
Manchester.
Trevor Thomas from Manchester, he wanted to be mentioned and raise a glass to him. And I don't know who they are, but John and Jenny Moore.
John and Jane.
I think Fred, is it?
Fred.
Yeah, they're Worcestershire, aren't they?
Jane, is it?
Starbridge, John and
Yeah,
Jane.
you know them. Yeah, they sent me
went to the
a
funeral.
photograph of him, and they wished to have a glass raised to his memory from them.
Drove all the way down from Stourbridge down to Basingstoke to go to his funeral.
Yeah.
John and Jane Moore from Stourbridge were actually at his funeral, and they would have loved to have been here tonight, but they couldn't travel down. So, so they emailed me and they sent me a photograph they took because they were always in touch with him. So, yeah.
Well, we knew Pete from almost the first time he came here, and with Pete, he was so knowledgeable and so friendly and outgoing that he actually conned us all in the end, because the division between his reality and fantasy was so fine. And you'd be talking to her in the pub, and he'd say, "Oh, did you hear about Dr. So-and-so? And he did this and he did that, and he's been taken off in air ambulance." And it would take you about 5 minutes to realise it was all rubbish. He just made it all up. But the funniest thing I remember about him on that, in that line, was one day we were going to town and we saw Pete walking along, very important, and he had a cardboard box under his arm. And he said, I can't stop. He said, "I've got to get this to Tresco by 2 o'clock. He said, "I don't want to miss the boat." And we said, well, what is it, Pete? He said, "It's very important. It's to do with my perfumery." And I said, "Well, you're not coming in the pub for a beer then?" "Well, just a quick one." And he came in the pub for a beer. He said, "But I've really got to catch this boat. I've got to get this box to Tresco." And Liz was with me, and she said, "What's in that box, Pete?" And he said, "Very important stuff." He said, "I can't tell you about it. It's very important." And after a minute, we thought, "Hang on, he's pulling our leg." And Liz says, "There's nothing in that box, is there, Pete?" He says, "No," he says, "but you didn't know that." And that was typical. He would just pull these practical jokes on every.
Well, you mentioned earlier that there was the same smell was still in the shop, and you're quite right. When I was renovating it this week with my sister, we found up in the rafters, or somewhere, I'm not quite sure where, we found a very tiny little vial of perfume. And I remember when I was helping him out during the summer, that he told me that he had these very special oils, which he had. Now, how much of this is true, I have no idea, but this is what he told me. He said that he had picked up this oil in Egypt, in some pyramids somewhere, and that he, which was, and he told me that the smell of this oil did not evaporate. But the crazy thing about this little vial is that it had no top. And you would expect that the smell would have evaporated. And there was about a little 1/4 of an inch of it left in the bottle. And it's as strong as anything. And that is why there is still the smell in the shop. And it's a tiny little beautiful, beautiful little bottle of perfume. And it's the one he was talking about. And he said it was very special. And he left it there at the top of the ceiling. So that's why your smell is still there, and I'm holding on to it. But I really loved him so much. He gave me nothing but positive stuff when I was with him.